All right, everybody. Scott Sternberg here, Sternberg, Naccari and White, live from my home office. Also pleased to be joined by my partner Clayton White in in his beautiful home in away from city of New Orleans in Alabama, and David LaCerte in Baton Rouge, who leads our Baton Rouge operation. And today we're going to be talking about business contingencies, emergency management, and continuity of operations. So I'm going to monitor the Facebook comments. So if anybody has thoughts, questions they'd like answered, let's go ahead and get them on the comments. If not, I'm sure you'll be watching this later on our website, SNW.LAW. Every Wednesday at noon, we are doing a Wednesday web chat about a different issue that is relevant during COVID-19, but also just during the general operations of your business. So Dave, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Welcome everyone from Baton Rouge. I think that we're going to talk a little bit today about continuity of operations, and that's going to dovetail a little bit with our talk last week about planning for disasters in business. And the first thing you got to note is, what is the difference between a continuity of operations plan and a disaster recovery plan? Because a lot of people don't know the distinction. And we like to back that out and say the focus on a disaster recovery plan is generally to protect your assets and your people, right? So you want to make sure they are out of harm's way, you're eliminating loss, you're eliminating risk. That is very much a reactive program. Whenever you're in a continuity of operations plan, you're very much focused on getting operational and securing your critical lines, supply lines, your critical areas of your business, and making sure that your business is protected and they become operational as soon as the emergency has been subsided. And we always like to tie that back in. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I always like to tell people, well, you know, the Marine Corps has two different missions. One is mission accomplishment, which is always first, and the other one is troop welfare, which is always second. And while that's not always the same way in private sector, those two missions are separate and distinct when you're planning for such things. You want to make sure your people are protected. Usually that does come first in the private sector, but also you want to make sure your mission accomplishment is right there, ready to pick off where you left off and ready to move forward as you progress, as things become more stable and your supply chain becomes operational and you can get back in business. So those are the two general details. And I know Clayton, you spoke last week a little bit about what it is to, you know, have some business succession documents in line. And if you want to comment on those differences a little bit from your perspective.
Sure, Dave, thanks. So yeah, we reviewed business succession last webinar, and that has more to do with continuing the business when the owner or owners are ready to step aside, maybe retire, maybe they want to go do something else, whatever, but that's more what the business succession is about. And we talked about a few things, publishing values and an orderly transition of the business from one owner to the other. It's easier if you have partners versus if you're a solo owner of your company. And then we also talked about some of the documents that you need to make that an orderly process, like your articles, operating agreement, buy-sell agreement, employee vesting agreements, and so forth. So one is an orderly transition that you've thought about. The other is to think about it ahead of time, but a way to handle emergencies or crisis such as COVID, or think back to Katrina or any other hurricane that's passed by. What do you do in those situations, right? That's more the contingency planning and emergency planning.
Great. Dave, who's responsible for making sure that these plans go in place? Do you recommend that people have a designated person at their firm? Or
so it's going to depend on, that's going to be dependent upon the size of your organization. We know we represent a lot of small family-owned businesses to where there's really just one patriarch of the family running the shop. But really the name of the game when creating an emergency plan and creating a continuity of operations plan is redundancy. You want to create some redundancy within your own business and within your own network to make sure that no one person is such a key cog in the wheel that the entire business is going to fail should that one person become indisposed. And, we always tell people an example of that is, we want to make sure that your family is taken care of if you're one of those small family businesses, to where a close family member, a business associate, a key employee can kind of step into those roles. So in that, you need to kind of in advance, kind of plan out who your key employees are. They might be department heads, they might be sales managers, they might be your wife, they might be your kids. We want to make sure we identify all the key personnel that we need to create some redundancy with in your continuity of operations plan. And it starts there generally. You want to identify who the key personnel are, and then you want to make sure, sorry, my video is cut off here. You want to make sure your key personnel are in place, and then you want to sit down with all those key personnel and talk about what are your essential functions. And depending on the size of your organization, that might be a large list, that might be a small list. It all just depends, but that's where your continuity of operations plan should generally start.
Just to add to that, I think some of the things that people have to think about, business owners have to think about when they're doing their contingency plan is the redundancy, and everything's great. We also have to think about communications, where people are going to go, what type of emergency we're talking about, and there's many different kinds. We're in one right now that's not, for most people, not immediately life-threatening, but others that are hurricanes that I have to get out now, right? Where do you plan on going? Where do you plan on being when you leave? And how does the company get in touch with you? And how are you going to get in touch with the company? So having a directory, a database, a spreadsheet, whatever, of all those points so that communication can happen rapidly and a response can happen rapidly is key for emergency.
Good point.
So what about guidelines for determining what parts of your business are critical?
I think probably first and foremost, you need to sit down and outline a plan as to what are your most critical functions of your business, right? So what would my business need to perform, or else it wouldn't exist or would be out of work, right? And you kind of go from the top of the list and work down, and that might need some shuffling. Some of these things might be intertwined with other areas of your operations, but you really need to sit down and create a list. And it shouldn't be done alone. It should be done with key stakeholders, those key employees you've previously identified. But you need to back out. If you're an company, supply chain of pipelines, whatever example may be. Without that, that might be a core function. So your focus on your operation, maintain your supply chain. If you're an IT company, that might be your availability to access information over a cloud system. You might want to create a layer of redundancy within your cloud in case there's a disaster in the Gulf Coast, a large tornado, a large hurricane. You can maintain functions and stay operational immediately after the danger period is cleared. But you definitely need to sit down and create a list from the top down as to what is essential, what is critical, what can we do with that. These are my essential functions, and these are my non-essential functions. And quite oftentimes, the best place to do that is to discuss the policies and the procedures with employees who have lived through disasters in the past. So especially if you come onto an organization, you might be senior management now, get with those employees who have lessons learned from dealing with COVID-19 or dealing with Hurricane Katrina. What were the lessons learned during those time periods? That's helpful as well. From there, I think it's important to also note that, Clayton, you touched on a certain point. We're dealing with, COVID-19, some specific areas here in which we've never really touched on before. It's important to plan for overarching times of inaccessibility. And there's a caveat to that. You don't want to plan for, specific fires, floods, tornadoes, things like that. But you generally want to do, if you're a large enough entity, do a tabletop exercise every year for us being us kind of being at risk and of danger of being out of the loop for an extended period of time. If a Category 5 hurricane or a strong Category 4 or 3 hurricane comes down our way, you want to do a tabletop exercise pretty much every spring before hurricane season. and that'll test some of your capabilities. It'll make sure all of your employees are up to date and in the loop, and it'll give you an opportunity to kind of troubleshoot some of the issues before critical time you stay in work and stay in business. Keith, I know that we plan often for different disasters and scenarios at the office. You know, we're very tech savvy here at the firm. We utilize different programs such as Slack, such as Google Cloud to make sure all of our systems are redundant. But I mean, do you think that that's helped us in the firm at all as we've kind of traversed this COVID-19 issue ourselves as a firm? What do you think?
I think you're absolutely correct. You know, we planned on hurricane type of things, and we were set up to work remotely, so we could be wherever we needed to be just in day-to-day life. But if we were separated because of a hurricane, we had to evacuate because of hurricanes. That emergency planning for hurricanes has helped us very well for this current emergency, even though nobody anticipated 4 months ago that would be all separated and not at the offices because of a virus, right? We were thinking about hurricanes, but it was the same type of thing. Where are we going to be able to go, and how are we going to run our practice, our law practices, if everybody's out of the office? And right now we have Scott in Metairie, you're in Baton Rouge, and I'm in Alabama, and we're running the office just fine. It's a little inconvenient as far as meeting with clients, but doing meetings electronically, just like we're doing this presentation, has worked very well. But yeah, so any of those type of emergencies that you're planning for, you're going to come across things that you didn't plan for, but they're going to suit you well and have you more prepared for those unexpected ones because you planned for the expected ones.
Absolutely. And I think practicing that and doing a tabletop exercise once a year in the spring for hurricane season is an absolute necessity for your business. Usually, I always tell people, you know, if your organization's large enough, consider appointing a continuity of operations director or designee to kind of be thinking about these issues all the time, because it's not something that's at your fingertips and you constantly think about. A continuity of operations plan generally takes about a quarter to develop and for the kinks to get worked out, depending upon the size of your organization. But also, as you're creating redundancy and you're looping in other individuals and you're sharing data, you're sharing access, you're telling people where your accounts are, you're telling people where your cloud is, you're creating all this transparency within your organization, there might be some additional documentation which you might need, because this might call for additional non-disclosure agreements. This might call for additional non-compete agreements. This might be trigger information that you want to keep a trade secret for your organization. So all of these ancillary issues are things that you need to talk to your own lawyers about, things that you need to talk to your own business consultants about, because all of these things are tied together, right? So if we educate the middle manager as to where our accounts are and what these denominations are and these holdings, or you know, who we do business with as an IT consultant and what our rates are there, you want to make sure all that data is protected. You want to make sure it's disclosed, not disclosed, because last thing you want to do is you want to use your good-natured redundancy you've built into your program to walk out the door. You got to make sure you're protected in it. So that's another key point that I want to make sure everyone takes away.
As an example, Dave, I've gotten my internet connection here to stabilize. One of the things we're doing in our firm is we're only allowing a certain number of people to be in our office at the same time. I mean, somebody's got to go check the mail. We've got, pleadings coming in, sometimes checks coming in from clients, things of that nature. So we keep a running tab of who's in our office. That's not something that was in our original contingency plan and our hurricane plan, because we didn't think we would be here if that happened, right? We planned for everybody being elsewhere. So how can kind of our lessons from COVID, which is a new thing for, I think, everybody who might be watching this, how can these lessons from COVID help improve those disaster plans, the emergency management, and the continuity of operations plan?
I think I should remind everybody that we're just not a hurricane state here. You know, we have additional problems beyond simple hurricane season issues that, you know, everybody thinks that they are aware of. They think they can manage at this point. We all should be hurricane pros, but it's always a reminder that there's other things on the horizon, and we certainly need to be kind of multi-purposeful in our planning. and our continuity planning and our business planning and our succession planning and our disaster response times. So those are all things which are kind of paired together. They're all dovetailed, that it's important to kind of get out in front of this as a business, as business owners, as business people, and planning is the key. Really, you can't be reactive with some of these things. You need to be proactive. You need to make sure your ducks in a row prior to the disaster occurring, or else it's going to be too late. Especially as we now encroach upon hurricane season. I want to always remind all my business clients that, hey, now's the time to make sure you have the proper planning, the proper policies to protect your business, protect your people, and to make sure you can come out of the disaster on the other side, both operational and functional.
And just to add to some of the stuff you were saying, Dave, I had an unfortunate example of a client I was just talking to this morning, whose employees are definitely scattered, just like a lot of employees are for a lot of companies. One of his employees that he thought was very trustworthy and so forth, and therefore he didn't need things like confidentiality agreements, NDAs, and so forth in place. And he found out, not directly but indirectly, that the employee who left and was somewhere else and actually getting on each morning's meetings and so forth electronically, had taken a job with a competitor in the location where the employee was, right? And there was no non-compete, there was no NDA in place. And this now ex-employee, up until he found out, had access to all his systems and all the client lists and client contacts and so forth. It's very, very important. It doesn't matter how you feel about your employees, your key employees, but I would say all your employees, you want to have these documents in place, because especially under emergency situations, people, it's just human nature. They have to watch out for themselves. Is my current employment safe, or do I have to go look for other employment and so forth? And in this case, this employee was sitting there taking information and bringing it to a competitor. So, and there was nothing in place to keep him from doing that other than just his honor.
And Clayton, I would add, there's been some real big changes over the laws regarding non-competes and confidentiality agreements over the past 5 or 6 years. So I would also remind all of our clients that even if you have one in place now, those laws have been modified and changed. So it is a good time to have all of that revisited with your attorney. So
right, and right now, because so many attorneys are working remotely, this isn't a bad time to go over all your documents with your lawyer, because they've got time. They're probably looking for work to keep them busy. And everything from your operating agreement to your key employment agreements can be revised and can be talked about on meetings, just like the one we're on right now. Live, broadcasting live on Facebook is not something I would recommend doing with a client, or your attorney. But hey, if you want to waive the privilege, that's one way to do it. But that's something that you should look at with your attorney and your accountant and your business advisors right now, because it is about to be hurricane season and we just don't know what's next.
For sure. As much as I like to teach second grade math, I think that reviewing non-compete agreements is probably right on par with that. So
fully agree. So guys, any other comments as we close it out here today? We've been on for about 20 minutes, so I want to give you an opportunity to say anything else about business continuity and continuity of operations plans.
No, I think we touched on the major key points here. I think that it's all about planning. It's all about planning, looking at things differently, building redundancy, and making sure the framework's in place to support your people and support your mission as we get through a period of unavailability or disaster. So I want to thank Clayton for teaching the first part of the series here. I think everything here ties together and dovetails. I want to thank Scott for moderating, and thanks for everybody for listening.
Clayton, you got anything to say?
Just to reiterate about the planning, once you're in the emergency, a lot of times it's just too late to worry about it, right? So you want to do things beforehand, not in the crisis time.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank everybody on Facebook for the Wednesday webinar, Wednesday web chat. We will edit this, put it on our website. You can see it along with all of our other COVID-19 videos, business interruption, business planning, things of that nature. And please submit questions or ideas for topics for the Wednesday web chat. we'd love to get more information out there to our friends and clients. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Thanks.